One of the most common things I see in people is that self-doubt and worry. People having these negative thoughts. And in psychology, negative thoughts is quite often the same sort of aspect of someone's life as what we call self-sabotage. So when we talk about it in our program, where we help people identify limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, and fear, we call these brain blinkers. If we're speaking specifically about the brain blinker of self-sabotage, there's some really specific ones that keep popping up that contribute to our worry, that contribute to our overwhelm, and those negative thoughts that we experience. And there are 6 in our program that we really bring to the front and are very, very common. In the psychology text, there are scores and scores of negative thoughts and ways that we bring ourselves down, or self-sabotage, as we say. But when we talk about it in our Brain Blinkers program, we use the acronym of COFFEE, COFFEE. And each of those letters obviously stands for a way that we self-sabotage. And I'll do this briefly and to show you some examples, just to be sure, are ways that we bring ourselves down, that we self-sabotage and contribute to that feeling of being worried and concerned, maybe overly so. So COFFEE, C is for when we catastrophize or make things worse than they actually are. You know, we have a colloquial term for it, a very misogynistic term, which is a drama queen. And when we give people the label of drama queen, they actually do the catastrophizing even more because that's what they think they are. So one of the first negative thoughts to look at and identify in someone or self is, am I making things worse than they are? Am I catastrophizing? A very common form of self-sabotage. Second one, the O. O is for overgeneralizing. And all of the isms we have in life are this. So sexism, racism. People judge each other based on the sporting team that they support or the color of their skin or their religion, etc. We do this a lot. And it's a form of overgeneralizing. If we go back to primal theory of evolution, there's a good reason we did this, because our little tribe needed to be protected from the other bad tribes that were there. So if that tribe over there had blue face paint on, we had a thing that said, be aware of blue face paint. Don't talk to people with blue face paint because they're the bad guys. And so this is a form of overgeneralizing. And we do this today. We meet someone from a suburb that we think is not very nice. We won't talk to them or we'll stay away from them. We see someone on a train that has tattoos, and because we don't have them or we think that tattoos represents being in a gang, we stay away from them. And what we're doing is we're overgeneralizing. It's one thing to generalize, but it's another thing to take it to the next extreme. And we've got many examples of it. If you've ever been judged for something you're wearing or where you were born or whatever it might be, there's a good chance that person's overgeneralized. That's a form of self-sabotage. Not only for the person who's been victimized, but for yourself. If you do the overgeneralizing, you're missing out on opportunities. So there's another one. There's another self-sabotage mechanism. COFFEE. So the third one, the F, is when we filter. And this is when we choose to remember what we want. So a filter, right? We can do that one of 2 ways. We can be a negative filterer or a positive filterer. Both are no good. A negative filterer is someone who only hears the negative, okay? And you might think, what's wrong with that? If I only hear the constructive criticism from my boss, the negatives, well, then I'll focus on them and get better. Problem is, long term, if we only hear the negatives, we tend to do what's called be masochistic. We tend to listen to the negatives so we can beat ourselves up, and that's not helpful. Now, that's one side. The other type of filtering is positive filtering, only hearing the good stuff. Even when someone's giving you constructive criticism, you might have your finger in your ears, not hearing it. And that, quite frankly, is delusional. So we don't want to be delusional, but we also don't want to be too tough on ourselves. Where do we want to be with regards to this particular form of self-sabotage? Right in the middle. When someone gives you constructive criticism, listen to it. And if it's balanced with some positive feedback, listen to it. Just don't pick one side or the other. So that's filtering. The fourth letter in the COFFEE acronym is another F, and that's when we forecast. And if you think about ways that we self-sabotage, I bet everyone listening to this has experienced this both personally and professionally. So at work and at play. It's when someone predicts something's going to fail or forecasts that it's going to fail before it even has the chance to fail. Okay, so in a personal example here, you might be in a sporting team and you look across at the other guys, whatever sport you're playing, and they look bigger and stronger and faster than you, and you start predicting, oh, we're going to lose. And you haven't even got on the court yet, okay? That's a form of forecasting negatively. What we don't want to do, we don't want to forecast negatively. We want to actually forecast positively. We want to say, hey, those guys look good. And if we're at our best today, we've got a good chance of beating them. That's infinitely better than before the game's even started, oh, we're going to lose today. So that's forecasting. The last two are interesting. They're two E's, COFFEE. And the first of those E's is what's called emotionalizing. And this is when, this form of self-sabotage is when we can't separate who we are from what we do. Now that's a little bit philosophical. Let me explain that. It's when we can't separate feeling like a loser when we lose or feeling like a failure when we fail. I'll give you an example of this. Positively emotionalizing is when we feel good about donating to charity. So what's happened? Our action is to give to charity, right? You might be supporting any type of charity. And as a result of supporting that charity, we feel good. That's called positive emotionalizing, feeling good about the good we do. Now, psychologists will say, do this as much as you can. It's great to feel good about the good that we do. It makes the world a better place. What we don't want to do is negatively emotionalize. And that really contributes to our worry and self-doubt. So negatively emotionalizing is when we fail, we feel like a failure, okay? So what we recommend here is if you're starting to feel negative about something negative you've done, separate the thing from you. So for example, if you've been in a failed relationship or you've been at work and you've had a failed project or a big mistake or you've lost a customer or you're a salesperson, you've gone to see a customer and they've told you to get out and they never want to see you again, a common reaction is to negatively emotionalize, feel like a loser. Oh, I really lost there. Geez, I'm bad at this. Stop yourself. What happened is, you fail, okay? I'm not the failure. I failed. So what am I going to do about the failure? So make it about the thing, not you. That's a way that we can prevent ourselves from really emotionalizing negatively. The last word, folks, is a word I made up 20 years ago. I'm not proud of making up a word, but I did in the English language, and I call it effectualize. Terrible word, I know. But what I'm talking about here is in order to not feel that self-doubt, in order to not always be at the effect of things and being negative and being the victim and poor me and here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. Instead of that, take the opposite view, which is we know what the problem is, or I know what the problem is. What am I going to do? And this sense of ownership is referenced in one of my favorite books of all time by Smith, Hickman and Connor. It's called the Oz principle. And the principle is basically, you can imagine it like a straight line. You're either above it or below it. And if you're below it, you're at the effect of things. You're effectualizing, right? And you probably know family members and people in your work teams and your sporting teams who are always negative and always denying it's their responsibility and complaining about the situation and playing the victim. And these people, unfortunately, they can't see the wood from the trees, as we say in English, right? They can't see what the actual problem is because they're too busy complaining. Indeed, there's no way they're going to find a solution to their situation. They're focused below the line. They're in the problem. And a lot of people stay there. What we want to do is get above the line. And getting above the line in this wonderful book called the Oz Principle, one of the ways to get there is to say, right, we acknowledge there's a problem. We know what it is. What are we going to do about it? And that's where some fantastic thinking comes into place. Because you say, if that's the problem, what does this company do? What does this team do? What does this family do to overcome the same problem that we're facing right now? And that's the only way you're going to get to the solution or any possible solution. So the solution to problems sits above the line, not below it. And the mechanism here, I guess, or the strategy, what I advise to people is you need to understand what the problem is. So go below the line, just don't stay there. Once you know what the problem is, get yourself above the line and say, right, we know what the problem is, whether it's at work or play. We know the problem. What are we going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? So there's your 6 ways, 6 common ways. Not that they're not the only ways, but there's 6 common ways that we, bring ourselves down, that we have negative thoughts, that we have what's called self-sabotage. These are all brain blinkers. Catastrophizing, making it worse than it really is. Overgeneralizing, making it about one thing, or not including people or products that are outside of our comfort zone. We forecast, so we predict failure before it has the chance to arrive. We filter. We choose to remember what we want. We emotionalize. We take things personally rather than making it about the thing. And the last one is we effectualize. We stay at the bottom. We stay below the line and focus on the problem rather than saying, okay, let's get above the line. And what are we going to do about the problem? That's where the solution is.